Star Trek Beyond, directed by Justin Lin, is the third film in the rebooted Star Trek franchise. Now, it took me a while to get into this series. Actually, I think it took me 2 years to get into the first Star Trek movie. It was back in 2009. I was just not looking forward to this reimagining of Star Trek, and finally got into it. And the first movie was actually not that bad. I enjoyed it, and it definitely exceeded my expectations of the film. And Star Trek Into Darkness, there were things that I liked about that film, but then they kind of changed the timeline with that film, and it kind of bothered me, being a fan of the original series and the original movies of that series. You gotta accept the fact that this is, I guess, its own timeline. It's in a separate kind of universe. It has no relation to the Star Trek series or the films. So, not looking at that, not looking at any of the past works, it's not a bad film. I really like Benedict Cumberbatch's character as the villain, and not as good as the first film, but still a lot of things to enjoy, and it was a much quicker paced film, and I did like it because the first one was a little bit slower than I wanted it to be. But the second movie kind of fixed it, but there was some problems with the story that I wasn't a huge fan of. But still a very decent film, and I was actually, because of those two films, looking forward to Star Trek Beyond. I know people were shitting on the trailers. I only saw the first trailer. I didn't see what the whole hype was about the music choice. I didn't have a problem with it. I actually don't mind that song in that trailer. I think it was perfectly fine. I know people were like, oh, it seems like a music video. I don't know why there's this hype about trailers. Let's move on past that and focus on just the movie. So in the movie, we have the Enterprise. They have crash landed on this mysterious world, and it doesn't take long before we are introduced to our villain, played by Idris Elba, who plays Krall, who's out looking for energy. He can suck the life right out of his victims, you know? So while he's gaining this power, becoming a more and more powerful villain, he's also in searching for this ancient valuable artifact that's aboard the Enterprise. So Kirk, Spock, and the rest of the crew, they have to deal with how they're going to get out of the situation, how they're going to defeat this villain, how they're going to fix their starship, more or less escape the clutches of this villain who is about to do anything to get this artifact. Now, some of the things that I liked about this movie, I liked the introduction of this character of Jayla. I think she was very compelling and just a badass in the film, and I think that was a really unique character. They developed the character pretty well. And she's just badass, I think. Yeah. Another great badass female thrown into a sci-fi film besides Rey. So, I do like the fact that they added her into the film. Idris Elba, I mean, he does a great job playing a lot of villains in every movie. But this one, I do not have the attention span to sit there for an hour and a half wondering, well, who is this villain? What is his motivation to be doing all this shit to this crew? Yes, he's seeking some kind of ancient artifact, but what is he really out to get? Why is he needed? We just don't get enough information on or backstory to who this villain is, what is motivating him to do all these things, and you gotta wait like a whole hour and a half towards the very end of the film to get this, and by that point you really don't care, because by the second act the film kind of goes really downhill and just starts rushing and throwing these action sequences that do nothing, okay? They just take away from the entire story. It just keeps making me think that I'm watching another generic sci-fi action film, only this time in space. I cannot stand films like Transformers or Battleship or Pacific Rim. Those movies just... they're so boring. There's a lot of stuff going on screen. There's a lot of explosions, a lot of flashes, a lot of sound effects, a lot of stuff flying by, a lot of crowded crap going on screen. But it's just, I am not interested in it. And this is where this series is heading. It's all about giving us this action adventure and not so much the philosophical side as we saw in the original series, whether it's the original series or Star Trek Next Generation or Star Trek Deep Space Nine or any of those other ones. Okay, it's very different. This is going for this action adventure thing. This nowadays where everything has to be translated into action and adventure. Take a look at this Ben-Hur movie that's coming up. This was like a biblical drama. back in the 60s, or what was it, the 50s, I think, even. And now they're remaking it, and it's an action-adventure film. Why are we getting all these action-adventure films? I don't know. And this film is just crowded with a bunch of CGI, and it's just hard to watch this film. It's not very entertaining, at least the second act. The first act, it was a bit slow, but I still enjoyed it. It was giving us a broader scope of the characters, the starship itself, and for once I was like, okay, they're finally going to another planet. They're exploring other worlds. Finally, they're going somewhere. They're kind of giving a nod to the original Star Trek series, and I was very hopeful that it was going to go somewhere, and it just kind of falls off with that second act, the third act. It just goes worse, worse, worse. By the end of the film, it really rushes a lot of stuff that's going on, to the point where you really don't care about that villain, which wasn't really developed until like the start of the second act. Where, yes, very well acted by Idris Elba. The acting all around is good, but what good is that if I'm not interested in this film? When we have a bunch of stuff just blowing up by the second act, and it's like, why is all this happening? This new rebooted series is good, but Star Trek Beyond has made me realize that maybe they should stop making these Star Trek films, especially now that Chekhov, Anton Yelchin, now that he's passed away, and Spock, who was in both of the previous films, has passed on as well. Maybe we should just stop making these films. We've made that trilogy, this all-necessary trilogy. Let's stop right here, okay? Unless we're going to make them better, because I'm tired of looking at these action-adventure films. I mean, you got to go back to the roots. This is what people liked in the original Star Trek, the philosophical side of things, and just deep character development, Here, we don't care for any of these characters. I kind of like Chris Pine's Kirk and Zachary Quinto's Spock, though I don't really understand this whole romance that they're building with Spock's character. I don't get where that's coming from. Again, this is like their earlier years, so maybe that's why they're throwing it in there, because they're not, I don't know. But just didn't really quite make sense to me then, and still doesn't quite make sense to me now, though we don't really get this romance brewing between with Spock in the third film here. But in general, just a step down from those two other films. They got to go back to the roots. That's what I got to say. And I mean, I know they're making another Star Trek series. Let's hope that Star Trek series is not a replica of this film. Now, this is not to say that I didn't enjoy this film. I did like moments of this movie, but it was just, compared to those other two films, it was just a step down to what I was expecting. There wasn't like this huge expectation for this film, like Star Wars or anything. I wasn't expecting a whole lot, but considering that I enjoyed the other two films more than I was actually thinking I was going to enjoy those other films, there was a slight higher expectation for this movie to do better, and this was just a weaker film. But anyway, I'm going to be giving Star Trek Beyond a C+. By far, not the worst movie you're going to see. It's not even a bad movie. It's a pretty good movie, but it's got some problems that I don't like with the second and third act. And a lot of people will enjoy it. It's a good popcorn movie. People who like Star Trek, like myself, will find things that they enjoy in the film, but in all, this is not the best Star Trek film of the three films. But the fact is, these films are getting worse and worse. They need to go back to what was going right with Star Trek, the 2009 version, and build on that, because I'm not a huge fan of the Star Trek Beyond. It's enjoyable. It's got some rewatchability to it, but it's not a film I see myself watching over and over again. Again, things I did like about it, but there were things that just kind of got me out of the mood of Star Trek, and to the point where I don't even want a fourth Star Trek film. Maybe it's the lack of Leonard Nimoy. I don't know. But anyway, that is my review of Star Trek Beyond. If you've seen this movie, comment your thoughts down below. What did you think of the film? Do you think this is the worst film of the trilogy? Did you think this was the best film of the trilogy? I don't know. Some people might love this film. But anyway, comment your thoughts down below. And as always, hit that big thumbs up on the bottom there and subscribe to the channel for more content. And I will see you guys next time for more unboxings, reviews, and movie news.